Judge in Donald Trump's Manhattan hush money case was supposed to decide today whether to throw out the president-elect's conviction based on the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling. But instead, he has delayed his ruling again, and Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg agreed to the delay. And I'm not sure why. No, look, I've always thought this is a case that never should have been brought. But after it was brought, and after the conviction, Supreme Court ruling should have no impact, so I don't really understand what they're doing. Judge Juan Merchan postponing the case until November 19th after both sides agreed to the delay. The DA's office saying the people agree that these are unprecedented circumstances and the arguments raised by the defense require careful consideration to ensure that any further steps in this proceeding appropriately balance the competing interests of, one, a jury verdict of guilt following trial that has the presumption of regularity, and two, the office of the president. Trump's attorney, Emil Bove, cited how the DOJ is winding down its cases, but what does that have to do with this Manhattan conviction? This isn't an investigation anymore. Judge Merchan is supposed to be deciding whether the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity impacts this criminal case. But the reality is there's no way the court's ruling should have any impact on this case. The hush money payment to Stormy Daniels came before Trump was elected president. Yes, the actual reimbursement to his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, came when he was president, but you're telling me that's an official act? Somehow covered by the Supreme Court ruling? Come on. So what's the delay? Look, DA Bragg should have never brought this case, but he did. So either you're in on the prosecution because you think it's just, or you're not. Trump's not going to serve jail time either way in the sentence. But you can most definitely move forward with the sentencing, which is scheduled for November 26th. Nothing has changed with the conviction following the election. Things have changed with regard to the sentencing, and there's effectively no way he can or should get jail time. But how does that impact the guilty verdict? Look, I'm convinced this prosecution helped get Trump elected. So why are prosecutors there now potentially open to maybe even dismissing the case? Are they having second thoughts? Joining me now, Mark Bederow, former Manhattan prosecutor and current homicide criminal defense attorney. Mark, good to see you. What do you make of this?
Well, it's pretty interesting. The fact that the DA has agreed to adjourn the matter for a week does suggest that they don't know quite what to do, and they recognize that the landscape of this whole scenario has changed dramatically. I mean, as of last Tuesday, Trump is the president-elect of the United States, and I think they have concerns about the precedent that they would set by dragging in the soon-to-be president into a state court to be sentenced,
They're just thinking about that now, Mark? I mean, they went after a presidential candidate. I mean, what did they expect was going to happen? If he wins, we're going to be here.
Well, I agree with you. I think the case never should have been brought. I think that the case was only brought because the defendant was named Trump, frankly. But you make a valid point. I mean, they should have foreseen this was a possibility. I think perhaps they didn't think realistically that Trump was going to win, that some have even accused them of using this case as lawfare, the word of the day, to try to harm his chances. And I also agree with you that the exact opposite happened with this and many of the other cases, that this absolutely increased, the chances that he would win. And he did resoundingly, as it were. Yeah. So, this is a mess. I think this case was always ill-advised and a mess. And here they are.
All right. So based on what you've seen here, based on your experience, and that there's a lot of that, what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, is the DA, do you think, going to request that they dismiss the case, or what are the options?
Well, there's a few options. I mean, on the one hand, the judge can issue a decision on the immunity issue, which I agree with you. That's not going to literally impact the verdict, but they could appeal that. And the problem then becomes that could be tied up in the courts for years. And I think the DA will recognize that you can't have the president of the United States trapped in criminal litigation in a New York state court over this issue. If he were to be sentenced, I think the DA would also have concern about the legality and precedent that could be created by sentencing either a sitting president or president-elect. It's true. The federal system, they have a policy, they wouldn't do this, but those are also open cases. This is a conviction, so it does become more troubling. I think everyone agrees at this point that if he were to be sentenced, jail is off the table. But then the question becomes, how do you sentence the president or president-elect? He's not going to be
Right.
sweeping subways. He's not going to be doing anything. It's possible the DA is even taking the view that for the greater good of the country at this point, this case is very controversial, and that this country is torn apart politically. Yep. This is going to tear it apart even more if they continue to press this. And the last thing that wouldn't shock me is that if the defense files what's called a motion to dismiss in the interest of justice on the basis that the man is going to be president of the United States, you just can't do this.
Right. Yeah, look, the defense motions I get, right? It's the DA's position that I can't quite understand, the idea that suddenly he's going to say, oh, you know, it's in the interest of justice to bring the country together. It's like, well, wait a second. Why'd you bring this case in the first place? Anyway, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.